What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I'm here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. So glad you decided to join us today for another episode of the Alaria Masterclass podcast. We're Alabama's only real estate podcast. And a lot of times we get local guests on, local to Birmingham, and sometimes we bring on national guests. And today, episode number 78 of the Masterclass podcast, we have a real estate master, a real estate mogul, Mr. Andy Werner of Arizona. How's it going, Andy?
Doing well, Brian. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I've been bugging you, I think, a couple of times to try to get you on the podcast because I think it's really interesting to see a lot of people. You're in the limelight a little bit, but you're we talked about this offline a second ago. You're in an area of the country. Not only is it probably the hottest real estate market in the country, but you've also got like all the gurus there too. You just named them off: Robert Kiyosaki, Dean Graziosi, Sean Terry. All these guys are right there in your backyard. How are you able to make a living, Andy?
We grind it. But no, truthfully, we have to go to other markets. But I can make a living here. It's just not the living that it'd be a good living for most people, but it doesn't work for me. Especially when you got staff and all that kind of stuff. So. But the way we separate ourselves apart, at least in our wholesale business, is really by rapport, and not having price be the factor, and so everybody that's ever worked for me as an acquisitions person who goes to the door, they're told from day one, man, you show up at that door and you talk about that house in the first 30 minutes, you're fired. I want you talking about them. I want you talking about what's going on with their life,
wow,
understanding about their situation, really getting to know them. People love to talk about themselves, and so in this market, believe it or not, this is not an exaggeration, it is not uncommon for us to show up at the door and 4 or 5 other investors be there at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's at the same time, that's not talking about all the other investors that came before and after the same day, right? And they'll have a stack of mailers like this thick, and they're just going through the list and calling it. And so you'll constantly have people that are offering more money, and then they'll do this whole bait and switch later on, as I'm sure you've seen before. Offer 100, and then they get under contract, and people think they got a great deal, and then they call them a week later and say, sorry, I can only do 80, right? Yeah. And people are really already. And so we try and educate them. We try and let them know, hey, look, this is where we're at, and I just know that people do business with people they trust.
Totally.
And so if you build that rapport, they'll do business with you. And are you going to get everybody? No way. That's not even realistic. But you'll get a lot of them because they believe you're going to perform.
So, Andy, I think you give some great stuff there. What are you doing specifically? You mentioned wholesale. What are you doing? And you mentioned other markets as well. What are you doing specifically in Arizona, and what other markets are you in? What are you doing there as well?
So in Arizona right now, I am primarily focused on wholesaling. It's just the nature of where we're at in the marketplace. I've fixed and flipped. I've built rental portfolios here in the past. I have 3 construction projects going right now, which is really low for me. And I do not plan on adding any more this year at all. And it's just because right now we're in a building boom, and it is impossible to get good labor. The guys that were calling us 6 years ago begging for work, they're not even answering your calls right now, right? And so, I've got 2 fix and flip projects, and I've got a new build construction project going right now, and it's such a huge distraction for me, and they won't be profitable enough for it really to be worth it for me to continue to add to that. So right now, wholesaling is what I'm focusing on here locally. I'm also going to be looking at doing deals the second half of this year in Tampa, both fix and flip and wholesale. That's and then I've run a seminar company here, just like you do, for the last couple of years, although we're pulling out of this market, at least for the time being, from doing future seminars.
Wow.
We'll continue to coach our students we still have, but we're pulling out, at least for the time being. We won't do any more seminars here the rest of this year. And the main reason for that is I don't feel good about teaching somebody in a market that's so difficult, right? I'm putting them into a position where it's going to be really hard. It's hard for me, so how much harder is it going to be for you, right? And so our students are all successful right now. Those that are applying themselves, there's no doubt they're making money, but there's other markets and other people that and that I know that their students are doing significantly better. And it's just because their market, is lending itself better to that. So
why?
That's why go ahead.
Why is the market so difficult there?
Well, because there's a gazillion wholesalers here. There's a gazillion. The wholesalers are probably the worst part. So you start with Guru Capital, right? So you talked about all those people that are here. You got Kiyosaki that lives here, and Dean Graziosi that lives here, and Cody Sperber that lives here, and Sean Terry that lives here, right? And then you have the big box companies like Bertucci and Fortune Builders and stuff that come in here practically every month to do seminars here. And so, of course, they're getting people to sign up, and pay for coaching and all that kind of stuff. So all this training and teaching of this business here, and none of those systems are any better or worse than the others. I mean, some maybe are better or worse than the others, but they all have the same intent, which is to help develop, the next generation of real estate investors. And I don't have anything against any one of them, but it's creating, massive oversupply of wholesalers. Wholesaling is real estate investing. And so if we have like a gazillion, I don't know what the number is, but we have just a ton of guys that are out there doing wholesaling, hungry, eager, out there getting deals. And whether you just get 1 or 2 deals a year, or whether you're getting 80, taking from a limited resource, really. I mean, whatever market you're in, it's still a limited resource. And so, we're the fifth largest city in the country, but there's still a finite amount of houses that you can get distressed and that kind of thing. So that's what makes it difficult. And there's a lot of young guys that have gotten into this business, and good for them. But I'm not young anymore. I got into this business when I was young, but these young guys, they will pound the phones. They will do stuff that most people won't do, and they'll get deals because they're hungry and they're just after it, and they're 21 and they're making big checks and showing their Lamborghini on the internet and whatever, and again, good for them. But that's it's a lot of work.
So, and first of all, I apologize, everybody. We're breaking up a little bit. Are you hearing me pretty clear, Andy? You're hearing me okay?
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
So you're breaking up a little bit, but I apologize, you guys. But so for you, because you've been doing this for a long time, Andy,
mm-hmm.
The market there wasn't always that way. Like, I guess maybe during the downturn, it might not have been that way. What were you doing in 2006, 7, 8, 9 when you start to see the writing on the wall, the downturn comes? Were you making money, less competition? Were you able to find ways to make money then?
So, interesting story. In late 2006, I took a sabbatical. Was having an argument with my partners at the time, and there was too many chiefs, not enough Indians. And so I took a year off. And during that year, I decided that I didn't want to continue to own a business that I wasn't running. Mm-hmm. And so I eventually sold out to them before the market crashed. Wow. And then I took another year off. All right. Now, that sounds really great, but one of the things that I would recommend to anybody is don't ever do that. It sounds really great, but the reason why it was bad for me is when you get out of the market for 2 years, even though I know how to do this, all of those contacts that I had mm-hmm. 2 years before, they've either left the business or they've got new contacts or whatever. And although, the old school people knew who I was when I came back in, it's like, oh, there's Andy, but he's not. My clients now became my competitors because they didn't have me to buy from anymore, right? And then they didn't need me anymore because they, so they're, although we could still have a good business relationship, there was no, I just lost a ton. You're like your buyer's list, right? You're always constantly building your buyer's list, right? Well, my buyer's list is now 2 years old. How many of those buyers are still in the marketplace 2 years later? So now I got to build a whole new buyer's list, right? I had the skills or whatever, but it's like starting over.
You had to start over. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Now, that being said, when I did get back in, which was in, I think, about May of 2008, it was like the best market of all time for our business. It was like taking candy from a baby. Mm. I wish I had more capital at hand.
Right.
I would have retired by the time of 2011 and never done it again ever.
Wow.
But the hardest thing to do was to get your hands on capital then, because all you could hear, everybody in the nation could hear, was how bad real estate sucks, right? I mean, it was just screaming that. And so all of my investors had all been spanked. Everybody had been spanked. If you were in real estate before the market crashed and you didn't get spanked, you either weren't in real estate or you were lying. I mean, that's especially in my market, I mean, because we're in like this feast or famine market. And so we went way up on the pendulum this way, and then we way overcorrected this way. And so in 2008, mid 2008, we were buying properties for 30% of replacement cost. Wow. And you're getting the land for free. That's how bad it overcorrected. Houses that had sold for $200,000 in 2006, I was buying in late 2008 for 30 grand. It would have cost 90 to rebuild them. I mean, it was insane. So you literally, and you didn't have to go anywhere but to the trustee sale. You didn't have to do any direct mail. There was nothing. And that's where I started out my business years ago. That's where I learned, was at the trustee sale. So it's like you went down there and there was 300 or 400 houses going to sale every day. So I had to do the thing down there and bid.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you do a lot of teaching and a lot of coaching and a lot of mentoring and training. So are you primarily teaching people to wholesale right now? Because you mentioned earlier that's kind of the climate that we're in right now. The real estate market cycle is kind of best for wholesaling?
Certainly in the markets that I've been in, yeah. And I still really believe if you're a beginner, that's the prime place that you should get started. It's really low risk. It's got very little barriers to entry. You don't really need any capital or credit or anything like that to be able to do it effectively. So, I mean, it's got a lot of promise. But all that being said, if somebody's got a little bit of experience, they've been doing some fix and flips and they want some training in that hand, then for sure, we can definitely help them with that. So I think what we do, probably not too different than what you do, is that you can really meet the individual on where they're at.
Totally.
You can tailor make it to them. So, hey, you're green, here's where we're going to start, or you're experienced and you want to scale. Awesome. I'll show you how to scale, and so those are two totally different things. You're not going to take the green guy and start scaling him today. That's like, he's going to throw up. Right. So, I've had students that, have had very successful businesses, are making, multiple six figures, but they want to take it to the next level. And so really the next level is just being able to be able to put a system in place that is able to manage that kind of stuff. That's all.
For sure. So let's talk about wholesaling then. Is that cool if we break it down?
Sure.
I think that there are a lot of different, we talk about it a lot on the show, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think you provide a unique perspective because you are doing it currently in arguably the hottest market in the entire country.
Sure.
Let's start from let's talk about your business. Obviously, it didn't get to this point overnight. It took a lot of scaling over time. But let's talk about, what does your business look like today, the wholesaling side of it? What does it look like today? Kind of the pieces that are in place and how you make it run. And then how do you kind of build to that point?
So, well, I'll back up for a second. So before the market crash, I had a business. I had two primary partners. We had smaller partners, but from an equity standpoint, but I had two primary partners, and we had a machine. 50 employees. We operated in Oregon, Washington, Utah, Texas, Idaho, and Arizona, right? So 6 markets,
Jeez.
All right? And I basically lived on an airplane babysitting a bunch of people all over the country, right? But it was very profitable, and the most profitable part of that business was the lending portion of it, actually, the hard money lending business that we had. So people like to, people love Southwest Airlines because they don't have to pay baggage fees, right? It's a one-stop shop, and I just go there. I know I pay this one price, and I go in. So I think most people really enjoy that. So we were the one-stop shop. I'm providing you deals, fix and flip deals, right? And then we'll do the financing for you as well. So you don't have to go somewhere else to get the financing. You're already right here. So the financing was where our real cash flow was. And so that was a really, really phenomenal business model.
And what year would this have been, Andy?
So I got out of that in mid '06, when I took that sabbatical, that business continued to run for another year and a half before the market crashed, and ultimately it went bankrupt, unfortunately. But I got out of it before it went bankrupt, so yay for me.
Okay. So when you got back in it though, did you just, so everything that you were talking about being in all these markets, that was before you got out of it?
Right. So then when I got back in, I went right back to the place I started, the thing I knew the most, which is the trustee sales, going down to the auction, and I was doing it as a solopreneur. Right. I had no team. I had no interest in overhead. I worked out of my house. I had no interest in going and hiring a staff. I didn't want an assistant. I didn't want anything. And I literally operated like that for years. I was so against, I shouldn't say I was against scaling, but ultimately that's what was holding me back, because you can't scale when you're an army of one. And there's nothing wrong with doing business that way. But I was getting tired, and I realized that, hey, if you want to really be able to separate yourself from the business, you're going to have to hire somebody. And so a few years ago, I finally brought on, which I think is the most important person to hire first, which is a really good, strong administrative person. Somebody who understands detail, and most entrepreneurs are not detailed. And, most of us are like fly by the seat of our pants, and that's what makes us good. We can make it rain, but, we don't know whether we're coming or going financially half the time. Right. And so you need somebody to like keep that stuff together for you. And so I brought on somebody, and at the time I was terrified to pay her as much as what she wanted, but she came so highly recommended, and I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of money. And one of my mentors told me at the time, and this will be helpful for anybody listening right now, when you go to hire somebody, you definitely want to hire the best. You want to hire slow, fire fast. But the advice he gave me was look, you're not risking this annual salary today. You're risking 1 month at a time. Right? So you don't have to pay it all up front, right? You got to pay 1 month. If it doesn't work out after 1 month, you've only risked this much money,
Sure.
So 1/12 of that annual salary. And so when I put it in that perspective, I thought, okay, I can do that, right? I can do that. Now, still payroll can be challenging at times or whatever, but that was the first person I added.
So let me stop you right there, because I think I've asked this question of probably a half a dozen people, and they all give me different answers. So you're so definitive with your answer, is that the very first hire that you make is a strong and organized, detail-oriented administrative person. How does one go about, you said someone came highly recommended, that's great. How would someone like me or someone that may be listening to this find that strong person?
So I'll tell you two ways. I'll tell you the way I did it, and another way that was that I didn't invent, that was encouraged me to do, but I didn't end up having to do because I went with the first route. So the first route is I hired a recruiter, right? Somebody just to go find that person for me. I didn't have the time to go weed out all these people, so I found somebody to go do that for me. And then they brought me the top people. They interviewed, looked at all the resumes, did all that kind of crap before they ever put like the best people in front of me. And so I probably only actually interviewed 4 people before I ended up with this one, right? Because they'd done all that legwork for me, and I just didn't have the time, right? So that was a good option for me. The other option that was encouraged to me to use, which I've had other friends and colleagues of mine do, is they will run an ad, like say on any online business job posting site, right? Whatever one's popular right now. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure you can figure it out. And you run it, and essentially what you say on there is, hey, here's all the things that you want, from that particular person, detailed and organized and blah, 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 proficient and all this stuff, has a real estate background, yada, yada, yada. And they go down and, send your resume, but your resume will not be considered unless you take this
personality test or something.
Not a personality test. You basically make them fill out a stupid questionnaire, right? So you can use like woofu.com or SurveyMonkey or something like that. And it's not stupid questions, but it's like multiple choice, hey, if you were ever presented with the opportunity to steal from me, would you do it? But literally obvious answers, but you're really giving them a task to do something that most people won't do.
Right.
And make that be like 20, 30 questions, and they're not hard questions, all right? But they've got to answer every single one of these. And you specifically say in your job post, hey, I won't even consider your resume unless you go all the way through this. Yeah. Now, the very last question at the very bottom, most people won't do it. And so you're already self-weeding them out, right? And so most people, they'll go through the first 5 and they'll be like, screw it, I'm just going to go find another job. I'll find whatever. And so then they get to the bottom. The people that will actually make it all the way to the bottom, the last thing that it says is, great, thank you so much for answering all these questions. Now all I need from you is to submit a short, less than 5-minute video of why it is I should hire you. Now, you even have less people that are going to do that, so you're going to have a whole bunch of people weed out, and then all you got to do is watch a certain amount of videos of people, and you can really quickly go, that person probably might work, I'll bring them into interview. So if you want to go the poor man's route, that's a way to do it.
But you hired a recruiter. When you said that someone came highly recommended, it was the recruiter that highly recommended them. Is that?
Yeah, yes and no. So yes, the recruiter definitely is like, hey, this person's solid. And then here's the references of this particular person. I've already called all those. You do the same, but everybody that this person's already has worked for in the past speaks incredibly highly of her, says that her greatest gift beyond her detail and whatever is her loyalty, and so I think all these things really shine and make sense for you. And what was funny is I actually interviewed 3 people the same day, and I hired all 3 of them, but not for the same position. I hired her, the one who still is with me, as my administrative person.
Wow.
And the other 2 were interviewing for that job, and they were so clearly not the right fit for me that I ended up hiring them as salespeople. All right. Now, they both don't work for me anymore. They worked out for a little while, but in the end, they just couldn't cut it as salespeople either. But I really liked all 3 of them, and so I found a way to make them fit. And that probably wasn't the right move for me at the time, but it didn't hurt me because they were just commission-only salespeople, and they were good people. They just didn't work out.
For sure. So continue on. So the very first thing that you did to try to scale or to try to grow was to hire that kind of all-star admin position. And what year was this that you did that?
Probably 15.
Okay, so you were a solopreneur for 6 years.
Yeah.
So 2015, you make this hire. And then continue on with the story.
To give you an idea of what this looked like as a solopreneur, I still lived a pretty freedom lifestyle. I mean, I was in a transactional business as wholesaling and fixing and flipping is, but I picked and chose my projects and stuff really, 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 really carefully. And I partnered with good people. So I had a consulting business at the trustee sales for about 4 years that I shut down, that I had 2 other people running it. And because I had expertise in that business, they had none. I got paid a third of the profit just to advise them, right? During the greatest bull run ever in buying houses at the trustee sale. So I had like really great cash flow coming in from a business that I didn't have to run and had very little involvement in. Yeah. I just had to advise, and that was great, right? And so then I just was able to then make everything I made on the side, and by the side I just mean fixing and flipping. I wasn't doing any wholesaling then. I would pick and choose like the best 10 fix and flips to do a year, totally fit my lifestyle, super easy. I just make phone calls and show up on job sites a couple of times a week. And, I made a really good living, and I was totally okay with that. Totally. I wasn't trying to be a gazillionaire or anything like that. I was totally okay with that.
So you make this hire in 2015 of this administrator. What did that hire specifically do for you?
Immediately, she took over every transactional part of my business. So from the dealing with DocuSign and contracts and wholesale contracts, then the organization of all that stuff in Dropbox and having folders and all that kind of stuff for that, to really getting our Podio dialed in better than I'd ever had it before. I spent money and resources on getting her educated on, things that she hadn't used before. She didn't have any familiarity with Podio, but I got her up to speed on that really quickly. She had a really big background in Infusionsoft, and I've been using Infusionsoft for years. And so that was a huge help because I barely knew how to use Infusionsoft myself, but I had it, and I was always having to outsource and having to hire somebody else to just freaking send an email because it's Infusionsoft, right?
Exactly.
And here she had all this expertise in that already. So she knew how to do campaigns and follow-ups and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, great, here's all the things that I've been wanting to do for forever. Go do it, And so there was just a ton of things that, like, as an entrepreneur, we have all these ideas, like the shiny penny syndrome, right? But none of them ever get to fruition, right? And so now I've all of a sudden got somebody who actually can start implementing these ideas. And that's when the leverage quotient really starts to go up, because most of our ideas are pretty good. It's just getting them implemented.
Totally. So I think that that's where I've struggled a lot, and maybe some people that are listening to this have struggled too, where I've been told a lot of different things. Your first hire should be this, 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 and this. But I tend to agree with you. The first real hire needs to be a strong administrator. My issue was I could never get someone who was great. And that's kind of what held me back. And then I don't know if you're like this too. I'm such a perfectionist. I'm such a control freak about certain things. It's hard to let some things go.
Right.
And I don't know if that's you. How would you, kind of combat that?
It's a process. It really is. I mean, this is going to be really painful for anybody probably listening to this to do. But the first thing that you do, even before you hire this person, if you can, and it's like literally like pulling teeth for yourself to do this. It's so hard.
I think I know what you're about to say.
Is to start writing down all the processes for all the crap that you do, right? Because it's all up here. And so, like, you can't just go have a meeting with somebody for an hour and go, okay, go do it. And they're like, do what? Right? And so, like, just the simple things like, hey, I've got a fix and flip. And like, what's the first thing I do after I acquire a fix and flip? How about get insurance? That's kind of important, right? And then we're going to turn on the electric and the water and the gas, right? In that order, and then from there, we're going to get a bid from our contractors, and so you just like process that stuff. We've all got that crap in our heads, but writing that down so that you have a process, not only will it really help you become more efficient, it actually will help you be a better teacher, trainer, coach at some point, if that's what you want to do. But also and the likelihood of this happening is really high, when that administrative person leaves you at some point in the future because they get a better job, they retire, they die, whatever, life happens, right? You have this to be able to give to somebody else. And what you constantly are having your administrative person do is tweak this, for lack of a better word, live document, right?
Yeah.
This is a living document. It's always changing. It's not set in stone. If you can make this into a better process, do it. My process isn't necessarily the best. In fact, it's just what I've done. Right? I'm sure you can make this better. That's your superpower. That is not mine.
Right.
Right? My superpower is being disorganized.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's so huge, and it's such an under kind of talked about thing to do is document everything. And I know all these EOS guys that are out there, and the Michael Gerbers of the world, even the cash flow quadrant talks about it a little bit. The systems and processes, you hear it all the time, but to actually, like, what does that mean? Well, it means you go write down everything you do in order and make training videos, and basically you have a training manual that, like you said, Andy, when someone leaves, you can just say, here, learn. The hardest part for me when I make a new hire is to train someone, because it saps my time. But if I have that training manual there, the step-by-step, the how-to process, it's like, here, go read this and study this and watch these videos, and then we'll come back and we'll answer some questions. It just makes it so much easier.
But the hardest part of either of those things that you just said is, and it's a fact, it is going to take your time to either A, train them, or B, put the processes in place. You're going to have to do both anyway. And so, like, why not do this one thing called write a book once, right? It's going to be painful. I mean, like, really excruciatingly painful.
Really painful.
Really painful. I mean, like, it's brutal, because all you want to do is go do deals. And here you are, like, writing down, well, geez, I don't know. And, like, it's amazing when you start writing that stuff down, all the little things that you forget, that you just take for granted, that you just instinctively do.
Totally.
Right? And you actually, once you see it on paper, you're like, oh man, wait, I forgot that one. I got to insert that there. Or I got to insert that there, because, like, I mean, the first time I did this process, it was like buy house, sell house, done. Well, there's a lot of stuff in between there, right? And
I think where the earlier you can do this, Like, I'm talking about like the earlier in your career as a real estate investor that you can do this, the better. Like when I first started, I had so much, you were talking about it earlier, these young guys that have so much energy and enthusiasm because you do a couple deals and you get these big checks. Typically what it does is it fires you up and it makes you want to do even more. And that's where I was when I was getting started. I wanted to work. I wanted to do something all the time, even like at night. I would sit there and I wasn't making too much revenue, right? Maybe I had 2 or 3 big checks and that was it. But I would sit there and like do my books every night. Well, there's nothing to do. So I'm sitting here like balancing stuff every night. I wish I would have been writing down my processes, even though they were terrible at the time. That, like you said, it's a living document. It's going to change. The earlier, I encourage anyone listening to this, especially if you're kind of newer, the earlier in your career as a real estate investor that you can start this, the easier it's going to be later when you could, I just want to tweak this one thing. I'll just go in and tweak this one thing. Oh, you know what? I don't like it that way. I'm going to change this one thing. It's way easier to do that than to go and create, like and I know we've been doing this so long, if we had to go create something from scratch right now, it's going to take us forever because we know it's bigger than buy house, sell house.
Right. I mean, I would say the most difficult, besides an administrative person, and you might be able to get your administrative person to also fill this role, although be very careful, but one of the things that my very early mentor taught me, this is going back 18 years ago when I first got into this business. And this is huge, so critical, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is having good accounting. I mean, it is so important, and you doing that accounting is almost 100% never the answer, right? Unless you like have an accounting background or whatever, but if you do, you're probably not in this business to begin with. So outsourcing that to a good bookkeeper and having good accounting, and then understanding the fundamentals of accounting. You don't have to understand the T accounts and all that kind of stuff, but understanding the fundamentals of accounting, because I really contend that not just in the real estate business, but everybody knows the crazy statistics, or hears them anyway, about small businesses going out of business. 9 out of 10 small businesses go out of business in the first 5 years or whatever it is, right? And then 80% of those go out of business in the next 5 years. The majority of those businesses don't go out of business because they're not making money. They go out of business because they can't manage cash flow. See, a P&L statement and a balance sheet are 2 totally different things, and I can be wildly profitable and totally broke because I'm missing this other piece called the statement of cash flows, right? And so like if you're running a fix and flip business, this is a great example. If I'm running a fix and flip business, I can be wildly profitable, right? Like I'm making $20,000 per deal, and yet I'm totally broke because I'm having to constantly feed this beast with all my cash, down payments, repair money, payments, right? Utilities, insurance, all this stuff. And so I'm going, man, my P&L says that I've made $300,000 to date. Why don't I have any cash? I can't pay my bills. I can't even keep the lights on at my house. And it's because you didn't know how to manage your cash flow. And I think that's very common in a lot of businesses. And so getting somebody to do that accounting for you, and then just learning the fundamentals of how to read those things, it will really, really, really take you far. It's not super fun, but you can make it fun. I learned how to make it fun because I was like, hey, it's just my score sheet, right? I played sports growing up, and so, I played football in high school and college, and, I grew up around sports, and I love sports, so I just started looking at it as, hey, this is just the score, man. This is a score sheet. Who's on top? Who's on first?
So, Andy, I agree with everything you're saying. So some of the pushback might be, and I want you to answer this question, is when you're the solopreneur and you're the kind of the beginning guy here, and maybe you got a few transactions under your belt, like making any hire, like you said it earlier, that's money out of my pocket. And I got to make sure I had someone else on the podcast recently say the words, you don't even deserve to make a hire until you have processes in place and you've got sufficient cash flow to where you can pay them and take care of them, and because that's their livelihood. At what point can I pay this guy? At what point can I pay this accountant, this bookkeeper to keep that? Because I'm sitting here I'm struggling. I'm a brand new investor, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm bringing in revenue.
I'm going to say something that's going to sound extremely radical, because I said my first hire was an assistant, right? An administrative person. And that's true. That's the first person on my payroll. but I've always had an accountant, right? In fact, I have two accountants. I have one that's my bookkeeper accountant, right? And then I have my actual tax accountant. And those are always people I've outsourced. So I don't consider them employees. I've always, always, always had them. So I would say the number one goal, you're getting started, the number one goal you have, don't go get business cards. Don't go set up an LLC. Don't do all this like stuff that's spending money out of the gate. Go make money, right? Okay. Get your first deal. Make your first dollar, right? That's the most important thing that you can possibly do. After you've made that first amount of money, invest that in yourself. Don't go spend it. Don't go, go buy a fancy car or whatever. Invest it in yourself. And by that, I mean, you're going to invest that into more marketing, a portion of it. You're going to invest it into maybe some more self-education for yourself. And then you're going to take a small piece of that and make sure immediately that you get a good bookkeeper, right? It's super inexpensive when you're doing minimal transactions because you're paying those people either by transaction or by hour, and they're a dime a dozen. There's a gazillion of them. You just want to find somebody that understands real estate, especially HUD ones and closing statements and that kind of stuff. But from there, what's so important about that is it's going to make your organization of doing your taxes at the end of the year so much better. You're going to have way bigger tax savings than you're going to end up spending in that accounting to begin with, right? And if you're trying to do it all out of a shoebox or whatever and then handing it to a dude at the end of the year, you're going to miss out on a whole bunch of tax savings that you otherwise would have gotten if you would have just had good bookkeeping to begin with. So wow. The real big temptation is to take that first $10,000 wholesale deal you make and go, woohoo, we're going on vacation. We're going to go do this. We're going to do that, right? And then you've blown it all, right? And I get it, man. I mean, that's how America is, man. We're a fast food society, right? I mean, instant gratification. But if you will delay that gratification and invest that back into your business, accounting, marketing, and education for yourself, man, you're now going to start really, really scaling.
Yeah. So before we go, let's actually you touched on marketing. Let's actually get into some nuts and bolts of wholesaling specifically. What's working for you right now, Andy? You teach and coach a lot of people all throughout the country. Things are changing. We're in hot markets. It doesn't matter really where you are. Phoenix may be the hottest, but it's hot everywhere, right? Market cycles everything's going crazy right now. Marketing wise, you mentioned earlier that you're showing up to a door with people who have stacks of postcards and stuff like that. What's working the best today?
Well, I mean, bread and butter is still direct mail. It's expensive. And this is market specific. I can tell you in numerous markets what's best today, but we still really like direct mail. But I would say what's working the best in Phoenix Metro right now, because less people are doing it than direct mail, everybody's doing direct mail, is cold calling. I mean, literally cold calling the same list that you're direct mailing to, right? Now it's a longer tail, right? So direct mail, you're going to get an instant gratification person calling you who's saying, yeah, I need to sell fast for cash, right? When you outbound call, you're not getting that. You get the, yeah, I hadn't really thought about selling my house, but yeah, maybe I would, right? That's a lead. They didn't tell you to piss off, right? And so you put that in, and now you're going to just continue to nurture that lead until they're ready to raise their hand and say, I'm ready to sell, right? So I would say the most underutilized one, the one that's really making the biggest bang for the buck is cold calling right now. Most markets other than Phoenix Metro, pay-per-click is definitely the highest return, but it's also the most expensive. That has the hottest lead. I mean, somebody enters in, sell your house fast Birmingham, right? They want to sell their house fast in Birmingham, right? Yeah. And you either taking that call or somebody else is, but it's super, super, super expensive. So it's not exactly a great entry point for most people.
Right.
So it's pretty scary.
So you mentioned direct mail and cold calling, but let's touch on both. Direct mail, what are you sending specifically? Are you sending a postcard or a letter?
Postcard, and except for probate, we do a letter.
So if you're sending a postcard, what does the postcard say? Anything fancy?
No. In fact, the uglier the better. We're always testing and trying to beat the one that we use the most, but I've been using the same postcard now for a few years, and I can't beat it. It's ugly. It's yellow. It has no pictures on it. It is two-sided. It's, hey, I'm interested in your house at 123 Main Street, whatever. I don't know. I probably have one around here anyway. It's very simple. I mean, it's hey, I'll buy your house fast for cash. I pay all. There's no commissions. There's no closing costs. I'll pay top dollar. You're just trying to get the phone to ring.
Yeah, for sure.
And with mail houses and stuff like that, you can do the mail merge, and so they see their house in there,
right.
Their actual address in there, and it actually has their name in there, and that has your name.
For sure.
And so the other one that we're testing right now that's having a pretty good response rate is these Google Map ones, so people actually see their house.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's those are more unique. That's pretty new and cutting edge, but those seem to be pulling pretty well.
Yeah, we were doing some stuff like that through an app. I just felt like it was too expensive per post. There was a monthly fee on top of $1 per postcard when we're paying 35, 38 cents printed and shipped, right?
Yeah.
So direct mail, there's always going to be a return there. What about cold calling specifically? You said it's the same list. Okay, the same list that you're going to mail to, you're going to cold call it. How do you find the phone numbers, and then when you actually get them on, like, how is I know you told me this before, but tell me how you're actually set up to make these calls as well.
So getting the phone numbers is the hardest part. I mean, when I first started doing this, we were going to Info USA to get the phone numbers, and unfortunately, Info USA only gives you landlines. So how many people have landlines anymore, right? I mean, not many,
totally.
Right? So they don't have any cell phone numbers. Info USA doesn't. So we learned that is super cheap to get phone numbers for Info USA, but again, not quality. So then we went and got an account with Nexus Lexus, and that was like pulling teeth, and it's a lot of work, and they come, with a proctologist over to your office, and they really examine you, and it takes 6 weeks before they let you do it, and then we ended up finding out that they just kicked us to the curb eventually anyway. Wow. TLO is another good one to go with. And I actually now just use a skip tracing organization. My buy rate's so high that I only pay 30 cents per phone number, which sounds expensive. But, when you're doing a lot of outbound calling, I know my numbers so well that direct mail, it costs me about $2,500 per deal. Right? In marketing, my spend is about $2,500 per deal, but in cold calling, it's about $1,200. So it's less than half.
Wow.
And that's even spending that 30 cents per phone number. So I get really good records doing skip traces for phone numbers. And then we upload all those phone numbers into a Mojo dialer, which is, just dials 3 numbers at the same time. And then I pay college kids, pretty well. I pay them, 17 to 20 bucks an hour, and they work 3 hours a day, and they just pound it out.
So that's what I was going to kind of get to, is that because you told me this before, that you college kids and you only let them work 3 hours a day. Talk about that. Why you do that? Because
cold calling's hard. I mean, everybody that's listening to this, whether you've ever done it before or not, you're either terrified hearing this, or you just intuitively know that it's hard. I mean, you're going to get a lot of hangups, a lot of screw yous, a lot of, angry people, right? The telemarketing industry in this country is probably frowned upon worse than being like the porta potty guy, right? I mean, you'd have more pride telling people you're the porta potty guy than saying, hey, I'm a telemarketer, right? And for whatever reason, that's how it is in our society. And so in this country, it's really, really hard to, from an emotional standpoint, to do more than 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
But the sweet spot, I really think, is 3 hours. If you do just 2, you haven't hit your stride yet, right? And so I won't let anybody work less than 3. If they want to do more than 3, God bless you. Keep at it, But there seems to be a diminishing return after 3 hours as well, on the quality and the ability for them just to stay attentive and that kind of stuff. So that's all. So you can hire a lot of people at 3 hours a day if you want, or you can just hire one person at 3 hours a day.
Yeah,
we're going to start testing out some people that have great English in Nicaragua. We're piggybacking off of somebody else that runs a call room out of Nicaragua, and that cost is going to be like half. That's going to be about $10 an hour for us. So we're going to test that. I don't know yet until I've tested it, but I've used VA cold callers before, and it typically doesn't work out real well just because of the language barrier. But we'll see.
Yeah. We're using somebody in the Philippines right now to cold call for us. So far so good, but we'll see.
Cool. Well, and the nice thing about somebody in the Philippines is, and I did this a few years ago, whether they're in the Philippines or Nicaragua or whatever, it doesn't matter, but that person, unlike in our country, is willing to work 8 hours a day doing that one thing because it's not in their mind that this is like a bad job. In fact, they need the work. They're excited to come to work, and they really want to please you and do the job. It's just in my experience in this country, getting somebody to do it for longer than 3 hours a day, it's like, good luck.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Andy, I can't thank you enough for sharing a lot of great information with the audience, in particular the stuff about hiring, because I think there's a lot of people that kind of get caught in, and then, I was that way for a long time. It sounds like you were that way for a long time too. You kind of get caught being that solopreneur, and I actually tried to make a few hires unsuccessfully, and it was probably me, just being honest, it was probably me. I just didn't know any better. But really providing us with some awesome value about, administrator, how to hire, what to look for, accountant, good bookkeeping, systems and processes, all that stuff. I think that's great stuff, Andy. If people want to get a hold of you, maybe there's some people in Tampa that are listening. Maybe there's some people in Portland, St. Louis, some areas like that where you actually do some training. How can people get a hold of you, Andy?
It's really easy. You can find me on Facebook under Andrew Werner, WERNER. You can find me on Instagram under Andrew Werner, SWPI. That's Streetwise Property Investing. That's what that stands for. So either of those two. So super easy. If you want to send me an email, it's andy@streetwisepropertyinvesting.com.
And I see you're stepping up your Insta game too.
I am, man. Well, so I've been in Russell Brunson's mastermind for 2 years, and for those who don't know
that.
Yeah, so Russell's the founder of ClickFunnels. It's a phenomenal software, and I really joined his mastermind just because he's a marketing genius, and I truly believe that all businesses you're in the marketing business first and foremost, right?
Yep.
So I just want to become a better marketer. And so I went to the ClickFunnels big event in Orlando a couple of months ago, 3,000 people there, whatever. And he's giving his tips and tricks. And I'm sure I've heard these in my mastermind before, but for whatever reason, I'm sitting there and I'm attentive for 3.5 days, taking copious notes. And he's like, and I've never been a big social person, right? I not that I've like avoided it. It's just like I just didn't have time for it, whatever. In fact, I was late to Facebook. I mean, I don't think I had a Facebook account until 2015 because I thought it would be a distraction for me from what my business was, right? Not thinking of it as a tool.
Right.
So I've stepped up my Instagram game primarily because at that conference he said, hey, if you're going to do one thing right now from a social platform, start with Insta. I mean, I recommend you getting on all of them, but start with Insta. So I'm trying to step up my Insta game and at least do a couple posts a day on there. And it's hard, man, because I'm not used to doing that and coming up with what am I going to put on there a couple times a day? Are people really going to care? So.
No, and it's great though, because I mean, you have such knowledge. You have such, because you've been doing this for so long. You've got such a great knowledge base. There are a lot of people in the business like me. I've only been in it for 6 years. Yeah, I've had some success, but like to be around someone and to learn from someone some tips and some tricks that you give out on your Instagram page is valuable. And I want you to kind of see the value. And you need to get on more podcasts too.
Perfect. Well, you know what my biggest goal has been for this is going to sound really embarrassing, but for like 1.5 years, I'm going to start my own podcast, and here I am. I still haven't started my own podcast because I keep going, man, what am I going to be able to say that nobody else has already said? But
yeah, and I just don't think that you can look at it that way. I've been able to carve out my own niche. I sent you my book about this specific thing, about being the local guy, and I think that has a lot to do with the business that we're in. Even though you are kind of doing deals everywhere, you are the local guy to Phoenix or to Arizona. You're the local guy to St. Louis, and you're the local guy to Portland, and you're becoming that intent. You are the local guy in these areas, and I think that people, you may not have something to say that no one else has ever said, but maybe you can say it in such a way that's specific to your market that no one else is really doing. The Sean Terrys and the KSI, all these guys that may live there, they're talking to more of a national crowd. So
for sure. Yeah, no, that's good advice. No, I'd like to do it. I think it'll be fun. So I appreciate you having me on. And by the way, your book's phenomenal. I read it. I loved it. I thought, and I'm sure you've heard this already if you didn't know this before you even wrote it, but it really reminded me of Gary Vaynerchuk's whole message. You just put it into real estate, you know? So it's really like, hey, we're in the giving society.
Totally.
People eventually pay you because, not because they feel bad, but because they know you, love you, and trust you because of how much value you gave them to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's a great message, and it was phenomenally well done. And I'm sure it was hard to write because it's hard to write a book. I've written one before, but yeah, so good for you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And we'll make sure we give the dogs in the background, we'll give them a credit on this podcast
seriously,
too.
Like, what is going on? They're usually like quiet as can be, and I'm like, what is going on today?
Andy, thank you so much, man. We really do appreciate you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.